great light, and love a living Father. This is a man of passion and destiny, David, chapter 9. What to feed an angry man? Anger is one of the most debilitating emotions we wrestle with. One reason is debilitating and paralyzing is that it is so unpredictable. It can be on us almost before we know it. And it can wear so many different faces. Sometimes it's just an irritation or the blurring out of a statement or a word we later wish we hadn't said. Occasionally, however, it comes out with such force that it results in hostile actions. Another reason it's debilitating is that it's so public. You cannot hide anger. It's on display. It's there for everybody to witness and remember. The answer, of course, is self control. But it's one thing to say it, and it's another thing entirely to practice it. Anger is a choice that easily becomes a habit. One man describes it this way: it is a learned reaction to frustration in which you behave in ways that you would rather not. In fact, severe anger is a form of insanity. You are insane whenever you are not in control of your behavior. Therefore, when you are angry and out of control, you are temporarily insane. You may be surprised to know how accurately that describes the great man whose life we are examining in this book. A man quoted more often in the New Testament than any other Old Testament character. A man whose biography is the longest of any Old Testament biography. Yes, David, the remarkable man who modeled patience for years under the spear of Saul, finally lost control, and frankly, for a period of time was temporarily insane with anger. If it were not for a woman named Abigail, the man would have been guilty of murder. A little background, please. In those days, most people who were working out in the field were shepherds. They kept the flocks of sheep and the herds of goats that were owned by the wealthy. In our story, the basic problem was one of labor, and the basic conflict had to be with an employer dash employee relationship. Basically, what happens is that David, the employee, plans to kill his boss. First, let's set the stage. As we do, you'll see that it is kind of like one act play that unfolds in several scenes. First, we'll get the background, and then we'll meet the characters before we encounter the conflict. Saul was still king, and while the official fighting of Israel was done by the army under his command, David and his 600 guerrilla fighters had been behind the scenes, fighting various wild tribes in the wilderness of Paran. As such, they were also protecting these shepherds from the attack of wild tribes that would suddenly overrun an area, steal livestock, and assault small villages. According to the customs of that day, at the time the sheep were sheared, it was common for the owner of the animals to set aside a portion of the profit he made and give it to those who had protected his shepherds. While they were out in the fields, it was kind of like tipping a waiter. There was no written law saying you had to do it, but it was a way of showing gratitude for a job well done. David and his men have been faithfully watching out for the flock of a man named Nabal, and word reached them that he was shearing his sheep. So it's payday. It stands to reason. David thinks that after the careful protection he and his men have provided, it is only fair that they receive some remu- remuni- remuneration. Remuneration, forgive me. The problem is Nabal is a stingy man and he won't pay up. Let's meet the main characters. When we first meet Nabal, we learn that he was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, 1 Samuel 25:2. Right away, that tells us he's probably got some bucks. In fact, it says a little later the man was very rich. Actually, the Hebrew word is heavy. The guy was loaded. Nabal had a lot of money. He had a lot of sheep. He had a lot of goats. In fact, it says he owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. He was clearly a man of great influence. By the way, his name was very appropriate. Nabal means fool. Understand, that didn't mean a person was simple minded. In the scriptures, a fool was a person who said, there is no God. He lived his life as though there were no God. Furthermore, we are told that the man was harsh, 25:3. The Hebrew word here means hard, stubborn, belligerent. Furthermore, it says he was evil in his dealings, 25:3. That means he was dishonest, quite a combination. Nabal was demanding, deceptive, and unfair. His wife, however, was just the opposite. Her name was Abigail, and scriptures tells us that she was both intelligent and beautiful, 25:3. Literally, it says she had good understanding and a beautiful form. She was lovely within and without. Abigail was wise. Her decision made good sense. She was governed not by her emotions, but by good logical thinking. She was a keen thinking, intelligent woman. And if that weren't enough, she was good looking. We'll come back to her in a few moments. Then there's our third character, David, whose well trained men have been doing their voluntary police work in the fields of Paran, in the wilderness near Carmel. In fact, this is the actual report that came back to Abigail from her husband's employees. The men, David's men, were very good to us, and we were not insulted, nor did we miss anything as long as we went about with them while we were in the fields. They were a wall to us, both by night and by day. All the time we were with them, tending the sheep. 1 Samuel 25:15-16. That's quite a report. Obviously, David and his men had done a great job of protecting the Baal shepherds from raids by any thieves. They were crackerjack troops who had done their job faithfully, efficiently, and quietly. Unfortunately, their employer, Nabal, a foolish man, couldn't have cared less. He lived for one thing, pleasing himself. Natural conflicts that occurred. Notice that natural conflicts, as this plot begins to unfold, the first conflict, implied in verse 3, is between husband and wife. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings. Their temperaments are different, their behavior is different, their attitudes are different, their philosophies are different, the way they treat others is different. It is interesting to see how this woman handled that conflict with her belligerent, stubborn, hard, deceptive, dishonest husband. The next conflict is between employer and employee when it was sheep shearing time. David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say, have a long life. Peace be unto you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. 1 Samuel 25, 5 through 6. Shalom, shalom, shalom. David sends this gracious, peaceful greeting. Shalom, Nabal. May your tribe, may your flock, may your profit increase. Enjoy the goodness of life. He also instructed his messengers to say, and now I have heard that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we have not insulted them, nor have they missed anything all the days they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Please give whatever you find at hand to your shearers and to your son David. 1 Samuel 25, 7 through 8. Hold on, y'all. All right. It's interesting that David didn't go to Nabal himself. Perhaps he didn't want to intimidate the man, didn't want to pull rank or show up with hundreds of horsemen alongside. Instead, he sent a few of his men and said, gather up what he brings. Maybe it'll be a load of lambs. Maybe it'll be a few shekels for each of us. Whatever. We'll take what he sends. So David's men go to Nabal's place where they communicate David's greeting and then wait for their pay. But Nabal answered David's servants and said, who is David? And who is the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered from my shearers and give it to men whose origin I do not know? 1 Samuel 25, 10 through 11. Gracious guy, huh? Notice how many times he says my, my. Guess where his eyes were? I, my, mine. Now, here's where everything breaks loose. Hold on to your seats. This is David, our hero, the same guy who months before refused to retaliate or fight back, even when Saul was trying to kill him. This is David, master model of patience. Maybe the men hit David with Nabal's response at a bad time. Let's face it, when men are hungry, they're a little testy. Maybe David's out in the field. He's got the fire going. He can already taste those shish kebabs, the onions and the green peppers and the roasting mutton. But this guy's but his guys show up empty-handed. Here's where anger explodes into temporary insanity. So David's young men retraced their way and went back, and they came and told him according to all those words. And David said to his men, each of you gird on his sword. So each man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed with the baggage. 1 Samuel 25, 12 through 13. 400 men. That'll probably handle Nabal, don't you think? When you overdo something in our house, we have a saying that says, you're killing a roach with a shotgun. You killed a roach, all right, but you blow the wall out at the same time. Hey, nobody puts on a sword just to have a discussion, so we have a pretty good idea what's going through David's mind here. But talk about overkill. There's no need to take 400 men to squash one tightwad. David has lost control. In his practical book on the life of David, The Making of the Man of God, Alan Redappa writes, David, David, what is wrong with you? Why? One of the most wonderful things we have learned about you recently is your patience with Saul. You learned to wait upon the Lord. You refused to lift your hand to touch the Lord's anointed, although he had been your enemy for so many years. But now, look at you. Your self restraint has gone to pieces, and a few insulting words from a fool of a man like Nabal has made you see red. David, what's the matter? I am justified in doing this, David will reply. There is no reason why Nabal should treat me as he has. He has repaid all my kindness with insults. I will show him he can't trifle with me. It is one thing to take it from Saul, who was my superior at this point, but this sort of man, this high handed individual, must be taught a lesson. This was the third conflict, battle way between anger and murder, and so far, David had lost the battle. He's completely enraged. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, put yourself in Abigail's sandals. Candidly, this could be her opportunity to get rid of an obnoxious loser of a husband. She gets word from the servants that David is going to finish him off. She could say something spiritually like, oh, I better pray about this. Those thundering hoofbeats are coming down the hill, and she's in there praying. Lord, take him swiftly. It's her chance, after all. Nabal has set himself up for this. It's time he learned a lesson. That's the way a carnal wife or a carnal husband thinks. That's the way a carnal employee thinks. Oh boy, now's my chance. He's vulnerable, and it's all his fault anyway. Now's my chance. Depravity on parade. Instead, observe what happens. But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, behold, David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master, and he scorned them. Yet the men were very good to us and were not insulted, nor did we miss anything as long as we went about with them while we were in the fields. They excuse me, they were a wall to us both by night and by day. All the time we were with them tending the sheep. Now, therefore, know and consider what you should do, for evil is plotted against our master and against all his household, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. 1 Samuel 25:14 through 17. Supernatural solution. So here comes the message to Abigail that we mentioned earlier. And note that the messengers come to her, not to Nabal. Why? Because he wasn't approachable. That's another indication of Abigail's wisdom. She sees her husband for what he is. She knows his weakness, and in his weakest moment, Abigail did not fight. She protected. How gracious of her. How wise. Then Abigail hurried and took 200 loaves of bread and 2 jugs of wine and 5 sheep already prepared and 5 measures of roasted grain and 100 clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs and loaded them on donkeys. And she said to her young men, go on before me. Behold, I am coming after you. But she did not tell her husband, Nabal. 1 Samuel 25:18 through 19. Wow. 200 loaves of bread? We do well in our family to get 6 Big Macs in a hurry. Can you believe this woman? We're talking the world's first catering service, and she didn't even tell her husband. Some of the very best counsel a man can get comes from his wife. Who knows him better than anybody else on earth? The finest kind of constructive help and direction and even exhortation often comes from our mates. They know what to do, when to do it, and they usually do it with the right intention. Sometimes a wife needs to act in favor of her husband and not say a word to him. And here's a classic case in point. For Abigail to approach her obstinate, foolish husband would have been instant suicide. He'd never have let her send this stuff to David, so she went ahead and did it on his behalf. I'm not saying she acted in secret against him. I'm saying she acted without his knowledge, yet in his favor. She ran interference for the man, and in doing so, she saved his life, literally. Now, just picture this. David and his men are coming full tilt down the hill. The only thing louder than the horses' hoofs are their stomachs growling in hunger. Their anger intensifies with each passing mile. And it came about as she was riding on her donkey and coming down by the hidden part of the mountain, that behold, David and his men were coming down toward her. So she met them. When Abigail saw David, she hurried and dismounted from her donkey and fell on her face before David and bowed herself to the ground. 1 Samuel 25, 20, and 23. Abigail had already thought through what she was going to do and what she was going to say. That's the practical side of wisdom. She knew exactly what approach she would take when she encountered David. It wasn't a shoot from the hip, it was a thought through plan. And three things stand about it. Number one, her tact. Number two, her faith. Number three, her loyalty. First, she fell on her face before David. And look at her tact. 6 times she calls herself your maidservant, and 8 times she calls David my Lord. The woman is a study in wisdom. On me alone, my Lord, be to blame, and please let your maidservant speak to you, and listen to the words of your maidservant. Please do not let my Lord pay attention to this worthless man, Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, your maidservant, did not see the young men of my Lord whom you sent. 1 Samuel 25, 24 through 25. She knew her husband, didn't she? Knew her husband, didn't she? Everyone knew what it was like. Everyone knew what he was like. So why hide it? Why try to cover up what he had done? She didn't. And yet she took the responsibility upon herself. When you sent those 10 men and they had their intention with my husband, I wasn't there to give another kind of response. But I'm here now as an advocate. I like to stand as a mediator between this man and all of your men who have been unjustly treated. Now, therefore, my Lord, as the Lord lives and as your soul lives, since the Lord has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now then let your enemies and those who seek evil against my Lord be as Nabal. And now let this gift which your maidservant has brought to my Lord be given to the young men who accompany my Lord. Please forgive the transgressions of your maidservant, for the Lord will certainly make for my Lord an enduring house, because my Lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and evil shall not be found in you all your days. 1 Samuel 25, 26 through 28. What faith she had. She says, David, as I look at you, I'm looking at the next king. Don't ruin your record with a murder. You're bigger than that, David. You have been wrong, but murder isn't the answer. Wait, wait, David, take what I provided and turn around and go back. And it shall come about when the Lord shall do for my Lord, that's David, according to all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and shall appoint you ruler over Israel. There's her faith. That this will not cause grief or a troubled heart to my Lord, both by having shed blood without cause and by my Lord having avenged himself. 1 Samuel 25, 30 through 31. You'll have to live with that track record, David. You don't need that. When the Lord shall deal well with my Lord, then remember your maidservant. 1 Samuel 25, 31. Oh, what a speech. What a plea. When you're faced with critical decisions, sometimes you have to do something very creative. Apart from the Bible, there's no handbook that tells you what to do when those times come. Nabal's life hung in the balance, and depending on how short David's fuse was, that's how long Nabal would live. His wife realized that she decided it would take a lot of food and a pleading message from me to turn that man's heart, and we can be certain that along the way, she prayed fervently for God to intervene. Often, when we are faced with a crisis, the standard garden variety answer is to sort of tuck your tail between your legs, run into a corner, and let cobwebs form on you. But there's a better way. As long as you have breath in your lungs, you have a purpose for living. You have a reason to exist. No matter how bad that track record might have been, marked by disobedience and compromise through most of your life, you're alive. You're existing. And God says, there's a reason. And I'm willing to do creative things through you to put you back on your feet. You can lick your wounds if that's your choice. But there's a better way. It would take creativity. It would take determination. It would take constant eye on the Lord. But when he pulls it out, it's marvelous. That's what Abigail did with this crisis. She just says, remember your maidservant. When the tide turns in your life, that's all I ask. Then David said to Abigail, blessed be the Lord God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. 1 Samuel 24:32. What a guy. Is it any wonder God chose David as a man after his own heart? What a teachable spirit. He's got a sword ready to be unsheathed, and yet he looks at this woman he's never met before, and he listens to her without interrupting. And he changes his entire demeanor. Talk about a man after God's heart. That's one of the reasons he was willing to change. Furthermore, how can a hungry guy get mad at a woman with a crock pot full of hot, delicious child? May God forever keep us flexible and teachable. Someone has a word and season for a blind spot in our lives, and we're nothing more than dummies if we ignore him. David models genuine humility here. Then he adds, and blessed be your discernment, and blessed be you who have kept me this day from bloodshed, and from avenging myself by my own hand. So David received from her hand what she had brought him, and he said to her, go up to your house in peace. See, I have listened to you and granted your request. 1 Samuel 25, 33, and 35. Mission accomplished. Everybody wins. David and his men go back full of food and all the wiser. Fantastic. Abigail goes home, and her husband put his arms around her and says, honey, thanks. You're a great lady, more precious than rubies. No, I wish it said that on the contrary. Then Abigail came to Nabal, and behold, he was holding a feast in his house, like the feast of a king. And Nabal's heart was merry within him, for he was very drunk. So she did not tell him anything at all until the morning light. But it came about in the morning when the wine had gone out of Nabal, that his wife told him these things, and his heart died within him, so that he became as a stone. 1 Samuel 25:36 through 37. She had stood between her husband and death, but the fool was so drunk she couldn't even tell him about it. So she crawled in bed, pulled up the covers, and went to sleep. I'm sure she poured out her heart to God and got things squared away between herself and the Lord, realizing she might never know what it was like to have a husband who appreciated her. The next morning after the ball sobered up, she told him what had happened and what was his reaction. The guy had a stroke, literally. He listened to the story of how 401 guys were on the way to cut off his head, and he got really still. His eyes became glazed. I would imagine 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. 25:38. Isn't it amazing? When you do what is right without tiring of it, God takes care of the impossible things. As we saw in the previous chapter, when a man's ways please the Lord, he makes even his enemies to be at peace with him. The same could be said of a woman, of course. There is no impossible situation that God cannot handle. He won't handle it necessarily your way, but he'll handle it. Seeing Abigail's faithfulness, God let her spend the night depending on him, and shortly thereafter, she buried her husband. And listen to David's response when he heard Nabal was dead. Blessed be the Lord, who has pleaded the cause of my reproach from the hand of Nabal, and so has kept back his servant from evil. The Lord has returned the evil doing of Nabal on his own head. 1 Samuel 25:29. My, oh my, did David learn a lesson? Blessed be God. He kept me from murdering this guy, from doing evil. I don't have to fight that kind of battle. That's God's job. If vengeance is required, it is God's to do. And for both Abigail and David, this story has a happy ending. When he learns that Nabal is dead, David sends a marriage proposal to Abigail, and she accepts. Lessons learned. Three things strike me as I think about this incident in the life of David and our lives today. First of all, whatever you do when conflicts arise, be wise. If you're not careful, you will handle conflicts in the energy of the flesh, and then you'll be sorry. What do I mean by being wise? Well, look at the whole picture. Fight against jumping to quick conclusions and seeing only your side. Look both ways. Weigh the difference. There are always two sides on the streets of conflict. Look both ways. Weigh the difference. The other part of being wise is to pray. Get God's perspective. He gives us the wisdom we need when we ask Him for it. Second, take each conflict as it comes and handle it separately. You may have won a battle yesterday, but that doesn't count when today's skirmishes come. You may have a great measure of patience today, but it makes no difference tomorrow when the attack comes again. God doesn't give you patience on credit. Every day is a new day. The third thing we can take away from this experience in the life of David is that whenever you realize that there's nothing you can do, wait. Wait patiently. Impossible impasses call for a firm application of brakes. Don't keep going. Restrain yourself from anything hasty. Whenever possible, put on the brakes. Slow down. I've seldom made wise decisions in a hurry. Furthermore, I've seldom felt sorry for things I didn't say. David obviously learned this lesson well, but he writes in Psalm 40, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined me and heard my cry. He brought me up out of the pit of destruction, out of the miry clay, and he set my feet upon a rock, making my footsteps firm. Psalm 40. 1 through 2. Psalm 40 never says that David's situation changed. It says David changed. When you wait, your situation may not change, but you will. In fact, you may discover that the reason for waiting was all for your benefit because you're the one who needed to change. The end of chapter 9. I'll continue chapter 10 at another moment. Y'all have a beautiful day in the light of your Father.